And welcome back, everybody, to Empyrion Galactic Survival. This is the Getting Started tutorial series, and I am an old guy gaming, and this is version 1.1. All right, we've got a lot of stuff to do. Spent the last few episodes in creative mode, learning about building blocks and the selection tool and all that cool stuff. Our next major goal now is to actually build something. But what I want you guys to know up front is I'm not planning on building something super elaborate. What I am planning on doing is building something that's functional. So we're going to go for function over form. That's not to say we're going to build the ugliest ship that you've ever seen in your life either. We'll try and make it somewhat decent looking, but I'm more interested in covering the functional part of things in this tutorial, not so much worried about, you know, the way that it looks, within reason, of course. But you know what? Before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and make a couple more very important modifications to this base. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably time-lapse this and not narrate it, just so that I can get it done quickly. But generally what we're going to do is we're going to create our backdoor access tunnel now that we are being attacked by the Xerax. Let's take a look in our statistics menu, and we're going to get another attack within less than 3 days. And so I'm going to do two things. I'm going to do three things. We're going to put a tier 2 CPU extension on the base. And the reason we're going to do that is because if we go to CPU statistics, notice we're getting really close to the 80,000 mark. And once I make the changes that I'm planning on making, that would put us over. So we're just going to go ahead and upgrade to a tier 2 CPU right now. We're going to do that. We're going to create our backdoor tunnel. And we're going to move our core into that tunnel and out of the main building itself, so that we can recover it if we need to. And I might even let the Xerax take our base over, just so you can see how that will work. We'll see. I'll have to think about that. And then the third thing we're going to do is we're going to put some more guns out here on the edge of the platform, because once we start getting vessels in, we want them to be protected. We don't want them to get all shot up. So that's the plan. And in order for me to add more guns, we need to upgrade the CPU. Okay, so let's do that before we go into time-lapse mode. We'll do that right now. So we're going to go to F3. We're going to go to base, and we're going to find the CPU T2, double-click on it to learn it. All right, and then we're going to go into our constructor, which, by the way, I did have off. I just turned it on right before I started the video. And we're going to go to base here and components here, or equipment rather, and we're going to have the system build us a tier 2 CPU. Tier 2 CPU, man, that's a tongue twister, isn't it? Is not too terribly expensive to make. You should be able to afford that, fairly early on. Okay, so we're going to make that, and then it's just a single block, the same size as the wireless, so we're just going to plop it down somewhere up there, and then we'll be good to go. Now, let's also queue up 2 more cannons. So we need to be on base, and we'll select weapon, and we're going to do the 2 projectile turrets. Oh, by the way, I do apologize for, I think it was episode 24 or 25. Can't remember. I had my 7 Days to Die intro on the video instead of my Empyrion intro, so apologize that was completely unintentional. Sometimes that happens, though. And so I removed the 7 Days to Die intro, but I can't put the Empyrion intro on that specific video without deleting that video and then uploading a new one. Then, of course, it would lose all of its stats and all that sort of thing. So I just took the 7 days off and left it the way it is. So sorry about that. Unintentional, but, sometimes stuff like that happens, especially to me because I'm an old guy. Okay, enough about that. How are we doing on food? Oh, yeah, let's take a look at our garden. Still waiting on those pumpkins. Okay, well, they should be coming pretty darn soon. I wish the game would give us, like, a time left stat, that we could see on these plants, but if such a thing is available, I don't know. I wouldn't know how to access it. It would probably have to be through some kind of a command. Anyway, yeah, we're waiting on our space oranges. These take quite a while to grow initially, but once they do grow, then they'll start producing. So in the meanwhile, we'll just let this continue on. Not a problem there. Now, I also want, in addition to the 2 additional weapons, where is our ammo box? Let's take a look in here. We've got 1196 bullets. We might want to queue up a couple more of those, but I also want to look at one other thing. So, do I have an extra container? Don't see one up here. What do we got in the output? Okay, so we're going to also queue up another container. Just a basic container, a cargo box. And we also want to make a couple of extra cores. So I don't know, let's make like 3 of those. They're not that expensive. And in terms of weapons, I've got an extra assault rifle and just a pistol. So we're going to also want a shotgun. Or, you know, actually what would be better, let's go back into F3 to our tech tree, go to miscellaneous, I'm sorry, not miscellaneous, go to weapons, and let's learn the explosive device. This is basically like, you know, your C4. And we're going to then make a couple of those. And you'll see why when this is all said and done. So we're going to go to the all filter to the weapons filter, and then let's queue up, say, like 10 of those. Okay, so right now we're just kind of waiting for all of this stuff to finish. Oh, that's right, I needed a shotty, so let's create a shotgun and a couple of, you know, 1 stack of rounds. Well, let's do 2 stacks of rounds, and maybe we'll do, what's the output on this, 50? Let's do 500 of those, because we also have our assault rifle up here, right? Yeah, we have the T1 assault rifle, which should be fine for now. And okay, so guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go into time-lapse mode here, and I'll probably play some music for you and just go ahead and start working on building all this out. And when I've got it all set up, I'll bring you back, and then depending upon how our time goes, hopefully we can get started at least with the first part of our build before this episode is over. Okay, so I will see you back here after the time lapse. I hope you guys enjoy the music. All right, guys, we are finally done. Man, I had a lot of trouble with the game. I had to log out and back in several times with, you know, blocks becoming invisible and having issues like that. But anyway, we have accomplished our objective. So inside of my core recovery bin, I've got some explosive devices, a couple of extra cores, excuse me, a couple of basic weapons in case I die and don't have any weapons or can't get back to my weapons. And yeah, so the idea here is that if the Xerax attack and they actually manage to take over the base, which honestly is not very likely. I mean, I have 4 cannons up now, and those 4 cannons are just going to make mincemeat out of the Xerax, at least in the earlier part of the game. But and also this kind of demonstrates how water works in Empyrion too. Water does not flow in Empyrion. It's just treated as its own block, and so if you dig underneath the water, then you actually have an air pocket, and the game's always just been that way with the water. But anyway, the reason that I made this tunnel out in the water is because the drones can't shoot us under the water. And so, you know, if the Xerax attack our base and there's enemy drones around and they take it over, or they take over our guns, so our guns start shooting at us, the idea would be that, you know, we would give the base a wide berth, and we'd, you know, go into the water, and then, you know, as you can see, I marked the entrance there, so that way we don't lose it, because otherwise it can be hard to find. And then we go into our tunnel here. And we run up and grab the explosives out of our core recovery box, because even if the Xerax, you know, take over our base, we can still get into cargo containers. So we would run up here. This core would be red because they would have hacked it, and then we would just grab our plastic explosives, or I mean our C4, and we put it on the core. And then usually one of these will blow up a core easily, as long as the core is, you know, just not protected. And then once that happens, then we just pick up the spare core and we put it back down, and then the base once again becomes ours. So this little technique works pretty well. I've used it many times before. And like I said, when we get the next Xerax attack, let's see, what's... yeah, it's less than 1 day, so it could happen any moment. We might... If it's a troop transport ship and not drones, we might actually let them take over the base just so we can see this in action in a real, you know, a real scenario. Just a couple other things I'll talk about that I did. I used the coordinates. These are my player coordinates to kind of position myself in the base, you know, where I dug the elevator down, and then also back out in the water. So I was more or less on track. Now I did manage to get off a little bit here, but that's not a problem at all, really. I used my drone to drill out this tunnel, and if you look in the oh, you know what? It's not gonna wait. Here, I gotta have this out. Okay, yeah. If you look in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see, you know, right next to the word ammo, you'll see 0.0 degrees. That's my level. So if I dip down, do you see how the level, you know, changes? The degrees change or dip up. And so when I dig a tunnel with a drone, as opposed to a drilling vessel, which is a whole different ball of wax, what I try and do is I get my drill out, I launch the drone, and then I don't move my mouse. I hold my mouse perfectly still so that my drone is 0.0 level. I figure out with the C key, you know, and the space bar, the approximate, you know, height that I need to be, and then I hold my mouse super still, and then just go forward. And the result of that, as you can see, is a pretty nice flat tunnel. It's not perfect, but it's definitely, you know, not bad at all either. If you try and do that in your body, you're going to have a much harder time keeping the floor nice and level. So I recommend, you know, that you use your drone whenever you're drilling out a tunnel, and you you know, you follow that little trick with the level. Now, if I wanted to, which I don't because it's just not that big of a deal for this particular tunnel, but I could then come along with the flattening tool and I could, you know, further flatten this out and really make it nice and flat. And the flattener tool will also kind of widen it a little bit too at the base, which is actually not a bad thing. And then, you know, you can just come along and you can flatten it out all the way. But here again, for this particular tunnel, we don't really need to worry about that. But it is, you know, if this was a tunnel that we were going to use all of the time, and especially if we were planning on bringing a vessel through here, we would probably want to take the time to go through and flatten it out. Okay, so a couple other things. You can't, if you're going to do a long elevator like this, you have to make sure that you have blocks to support it. If I would have just run the elevators straight down without the blocks, they would have broken because the structural integrity of the SI would have only, you know, wouldn't have been able to support hanging elevators all the way down. So if you're going to do that, make sure that you first lay blocks. And it's also going to work much better for you, assuming you know you can do this. You're not so far away from the base that you can't see it. As you may have noticed that I pressed the in key and I used the connect to tutorial base. In other words, so I had the block equipped and then I said, consider this block part of the tutorial base. And then I came all the way back down here on the ground and worked my way up. It's going to be a lot easier than trying to do it the other way around, working your way down, because then you're going to have problems with the SI not working correctly and that sort of thing. Okay? Whenever you have elevators attached to your base, elevators are not airtight. Okay? And so you want to make sure that you put a door, an airtight door over the elevators, you know, whether it's a vertical elevator like this or it's horizontal, in order to continue keeping your base sealed. We do need to replace this block because our base currently is not sealed with that big gaping hole there. And I also demonstrated, of course, that you can destroy your core and then put a new one down, and then the base will once again become yours. So we're looking for overflow, yeah. So let's attach to overflow. We'll put a block there, and then we'll go to our texture tool. And we're using this texture, and was it this gray? Yep, that's the one. All right, then we can paint our door if we want to as well. You also saw that I set up our additional defense turrets out here. And this is where I was having a lot of trouble with the symmetry plane, and where I had to log a couple times, and I finally said screw it, and I just built them one at a time, because for whatever reason it just was acting really strange. And then you also saw that I upgraded these normal concrete blocks to armored concrete, which is much, much stronger, because what's going to happen is if the drones come from the west, you know, they're probably going to hit these towers. They're probably going to aim for the cannons, but there's going to be some splash damage on the towers too. So I definitely wanted these towers to be armored concrete, and really I should upgrade the entire base to armored concrete. And I probably would if, you know, I was going to stay here for, you know, a much longer time. And I still even might, you know, but that's something I would do off camera, because who wants to watch me upgrade, you know, 3,000 blocks to armored concrete? All right. We set our CPU extender up. And, you know, since we added some more stuff to the base, we are now at almost 91,000. Had I not added the CPU, you know, we would have gone over at 80,000. So now that we have the tier 2, we have a lot more room to continue upgrading this base until we get to a point where we have to then upgrade it again, you know, to go to the next level and so on and so forth. But, you know, with this base, as small as it is, you know, tier 2 should last us for quite some time. You may have noticed, too, that when I started the time-lapse, there was a radiation fog outside, and I was taking radiation. So there was a couple times when I came and took a shower to remove that body radiation. Okay, I think I've mostly covered everything I did in the time-lapse. You also may have noticed that when I went to mine out the rest of our ore deposits, the ones that are close by, I then also filled them in with the filler tool. I couldn't show you that the first time we did some mining because I didn't have the mining tool at that time. There is no filler tool on the survival tool, but on the real drill you can. So it's always a good idea to fill those holes in after you make them, so you or somebody else, if you're on a multiplayer server, doesn't accidentally fall into them later on and break your leg or something like that. Okay, guys, so that is pretty much it for the upgrades that I want to make to the base. I did also show you in the time-lapse how we named the turrets according to their direction, so that way we can tell which one is which. And in order to do that, you have to first auto-group. In fact, we should do that because we have some new stuff that we added. You always have to auto-group before you can name anything, okay? Remember what I said about auto-group, though. You got to be careful with that, because if you auto-group, you will destroy any custom groups that you made, and we'll have to redo those. I believe we did a custom group a few episodes ago. Yeah, we did a low-power custom group, but you see, the switch itself is still there, but my low-power group got wiped out when I auto-grouped. So now what we need to do is we need to create that, which we can do. So we're just going to go add group. We're going to call this low power. And then we're going to add the items into there that are going to, cost power, the constructors in particular more than anything else. So we're going to move those to the low power group. The small constructor, now we're going to choose this add to last group, and it'll just add whatever to the very last group. We put a bunch of lights on the base now too, and we don't really need any of these lights to stay on while we're gone. So I'm just going to go through and add those too, because all of those lights together are going to, have some power draw to them. Not a ton, but, some. So let's just add all of these. I don't think you can't select like a bunch of them at the same time and add them, unfortunately. And you can't add the group itself, so you just have to do it individually. But this little button does make that a little bit faster to do. So at least I'm not, screwing around in a drop-down menu for every single one of these. Okay, so we've got our two constructors, our lights in the low power group. We could also put... You don't really want to turn your wireless connector off, only because you might want to use it when you're coming back to the base with a full load, and if it's not on, then you can't use it. You know what I mean? So and it doesn't draw that much power anyway. So I leave that on. The food processor draws 300 power units, but I don't know that it only draws 30 when it's idle. So here again, I mean, we could add this to there, but if we've queued up a bunch of food, to cook up while we're gone, then that could be a problem. So I think I won't add that to the group at the moment. And we don't want to add the growing lights to the group. Those have to stay on all of the time or we'll lose our crops. The medic station, does that use any power? It uses a little bit. And, there's no reason why we couldn't add that to the group. And I don't think the ATM machine uses any power to speak of. Like, yeah, one power unit. I don't think I have to worry about that. The turrets... We don't want to add those to the low power group. I mean, they do use a little bit of energy, but these aren't really energy heavy. They're more CPU heavy. But for obvious reasons, I wouldn't want to add these to the low power group and then turn them off and then have my base get attacked. Okay, so now that we've added all of that stuff to the low power group, we're going to select the low power group and we're going to assign it back to our low power button. All right, and then on the main tab now. Right now we have a power draw or a consumption of 0.2 thousand units, and if we turn this off, it reduces the power, well, not by a whole lot really. We have 190 here. If we turn it back on, that jumps up to 219. So yeah, it does make a little bit of a difference. Not a huge difference, but a little bit of a difference. Okay. I don't know if you guys noticed this during the time lapse too, but at one point or another, I accidentally hit the Y key. Guess what happens when you hit the Y key and you're on your base? Oops, everything gets turned off. So be careful of that. You will do it. It's easy to do. So, just kind of be aware of that. That could potentially have dire consequences if you're being attacked or, you lose your crops or something like that. All right, I think that covers everything that we did during the time lapse. If you guys still have questions about anything that I did during that time lapse, feel free, of course, to ask about those in the comments.